Hi, my name is Taylor Scher, and today I'm going to be talking about race issues within the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So, first I'm going to start with a small introduction, giving you some background as to where Israel and Palestine are located, a timeline that events have occurred, and then I'll be going into a little bit more of the background information and the details of the events that have played out over time. So here's a little map of where Israel and Palestine is located. It is located in the Middle East, right above the continent of Africa, the mainland, on this little strip right over here. And actually, the whole entire state is only about 8,100 square miles. So it is definitely a very small stretch. Here's a quick little timeline just to give you kind of an overview before I go into the details. But in 1948, the State of Israel was born. In 1967, the Six-Day War broke out. Going on over to 1973, the Yom Kippur War broke out. And in 1987 was the first Intifada, which is an uprising by the Palestinian people. The second Intifada broke out between the years 2001 and 2002. And the most current update we have is in 2011, in which the Palestinian people had a proposal for the unilateral declaration of statehood. Here's some background information on what's been going on. So, following the Holocaust and World War II, the Jewish people wanted a place to call home. In 1948, Israel and Palestine went to war. Once the war was finished, the land was split, and the Jewish people got the home that they had finally asked for, and this is when Israel was born. In 1967, there was another war that broke out, and it lasted 6 days. Therefore, it was called the Six-Day War. Israel started to occupy Palestine, and there was a lot of Israeli troops that stayed behind there for years. After Israel hoped that they might exchange the land that they won for Arab countries, recognizing Israel's right to exist and put an end to the fighting, but that definitely wasn't the last of it. In 1973, the Yom Kippur War broke out, and that's when Egypt and Syria attacked Israel in order to get the Palestinian land back. There wasn't any progress, though, that was ever made, and the war actually resulted in the death of a lot of soldiers. In 1987 and 2001 to 2002, Intifadas broke out. These were basically uprisings from the people of Palestine who wanted freedom, and they wanted to be left alone and unoccupied by Israel, having nothing to do with them. Israel finally left in 2005, but quickly after, there was a group called Hamas that took control, and a lot of people consider Hamas to be a terrorist organization. It refused to recognize Israel as a country, and it wanted Palestinians to basically be able to return to their own home and for them to be free from Israel. Since then, Israel was held under a Gaza blockade, which meant that it controlled its borders and limited who could get in and out of the state, although in 2011, Palestine did file for a unilateral declaration of statehood to be considered a state by the United Nations. The second part of my project is going to be talking about how race plays into the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So this is kind of a big question when it comes to race within this conflict, but a lot of people do ask if Judaism is really a race, and it's honestly scientifically kind of black and white, but most people culturally think about it as a gray area. So when it comes to Judaism and to Jewish people in general, people believe that Judaism is just a religion, which is true, but there's actually a lot of other facets of the Jewish people to take into consideration. Jewish people are made up from a lot of different races, actually, such as Indian Jews, Oriental Jews, African American Jews, and the list could honestly go on. So, although Jews are not a race, they are made up, though, of a nationality, a religion, and a culture. It is really important for the Jewish people to have a land to call their own after years and years of persecution that they had to go through, and still constantly do go through, as a lot of creeds and races do in the Middle East. But Israel as a nation is what binds the Jewish people together, and their thought process behind it is that if Muslim people and Christianity people have countries that represent them as a majority, such as the US representing a Christian based faith, or Arab countries representing a Muslim based faith, that they kind of want to have their place in the world as well. So, at the end of the day, although Jews are not a race, the land that they are fighting for is to make themselves present and to continue a nationality that many people actually do see as a race. The second part that I want to go into is kind of the tug of war aspect of this, which is kind of people's question of who is the superior race. While the power struggle continues between Israel and Palestine, the two states are actually really fighting to win back who they feel is rightfully entitled to the land. And in their eyes, though, whoever wins the battle is ultimately the superior race, which a lot of people may not disagree with. But when people are tied so closely to their religion, their faith, and their culture, they do see it as winning a war, being a superior race or a superior people. The third part of my project that I'd like to go into is racial discrimination throughout the conflict, which is very controversial, and there are definitely still talks about the UN with what's going on in Israel and occupying. So, although it's been going on for over 100 years, there has actually been progress kind of happening within the last 10 to 20 years because of the issues that the media has been putting into the light. There has been a lot of racism back and forth between Israeli Jews and Muslim Arabs. There's been racism through institutional laws, personal attitudes towards each other, the media that's being released regarding the conflict, education that children are getting in schools, immigration rights between the two, housing laws, and legal policies. Although certain laws do explicitly and implicitly discriminate on the bias and the basis of creed or race, it results in a privilege of Jewish citizens, and there's definitely a large disadvantage of non-Jewish citizens because of all the occupied areas that the Israeli people do occupy within Palestine. In this case, though, particularly Arab citizens of the state are the ones that are being affected, and that some laws that affect the people are the law of return, the ban on family unification, and many laws regarding security, land and planning, citizenship, political representation, the Knesset, and education and culture. While Israel does occupy a lot of places in Palestine, and there's a lot of conflict within the Golan Heights and the Gaza Strip, there is also a really harsh hammer that comes down on the Palestinian people because they are basically being treated like second-class citizens in what the world doesn't believe is their own country, although it definitely is an area that at some point they do have a responsibility and a tie to as well. The last part of this is basically saying and summarizing that while it's easy to point fingers as to who is in the wrong and what side that you stand with, the conflict is almost as complex as who came first, the chicken or the egg. In conclusion, though, I have summarized some solutions to the conflict. The theory behind this is that a lot of people predict that if Israel and Palestine don't work it out in the really near future, that Palestine will actually cease to exist by 2021, which is very soon. What's left of the state buildings and operations will either be out of business because there's no, food or any items that can be put in and out of Palestine because of the occupation of Israel and how strict it is. And because of the ongoing conflict, there will be a lot of buildings that will be destroyed. Well, they basically have two options. There is either a one-state solution or a two-state solution. A new era is upon us, and it's coming very quickly. And if they don't do something soon, they're unsure that there could be a future of anything positive for either side. The one-state solution basically states that Israel and Palestine would be one democratic secular state, and they would basically live together with equal rights. Some pros to this is that there would be equality throughout the whole entire state. No one would be treated as second-class citizens anymore, and they could all be treated equally within laws and laws that they have to abide. Another pro is that there would be no more occupying territories, so they could kind of get their land back as to where Israel's occupying in Palestine right now, and that the state would become everyone's land. Some cons to this is that because they would be living in close quarters, there would be a large amount of increased racism because they would be interacting more. There might be a decrease in a Jewish state, meaning that, again, there wouldn't be a majority land for Jewish people, and this would also enhance a lot of logistical problems, such as where you would draw borders, how people would deal with refugees in Palestine, and so on and so forth. The second one is a two-state solution, which actually a lot of people do favor, and up until recently, the US and Israel favored it, although they did back out a little bit ago, saying that they did not support it anymore. But in a two-state solution, the two states would be created, there would be Israel and Palestine, and realistically, there would retain a Jewish majority, and then Palestine would be a Muslim Arab majority, and they would both get their way. Some pros to this is that the Jewish state stays Jewish, so what they fought for all these years, they would have got. It would be easier to govern because they could both have their separate governments doing what they would like to do, and the majority of people would be happy because the majority of people in this region do support the two-state solution. Some cons to this, though, where would be border issues and where you draw the borders. Another issue would be what you would do with Jerusalem and where that would lie, because so many people do take it to heart, and it is very close for not only Jewish and Muslim people, but for Christianity and stuff because of Jesus Christ and a lot of, religious events that have happened there. And the last thing would be the refugees as well, and just trying to figure out what to do with them and where they would lie. So, going back to the end of it, though, I think that race is definitely a large issue in this, and until they can figure it out, there will continue to be race issues within the conflict, and until they can figure the solution out, there may not be an end to this anytime soon. Thank you so much for watching my presentation.